Hi, it's Roger, thanks for dropping by. I'm going to have a go at some repotting. I've got an Orchid Society meeting this afternoon, which I haven't actually decided whether I'm going or not yet. If I go, I'll probably take a couple of plants in, but this Orchid Society, the one that meets on Saturday afternoons, it's their AGM, and I don't know whether they have the points competition table on an AGM type meeting. I don't actually know that, so I can take a couple along, and if they haven't got a competition table, well, they can stay in the car or whatever. I'll sort that out. But yeah, the information available for that one is a bit thin on the ground compared with my main one, so finding out what goes on doesn't happen so easily. Paraphernalia, there's two Cattleyas there. There's the Avanagara Apple Blossom, and there's my big blousy magenta hybrid, no ID, that had the four blooms on earlier, and both of those are going to go in the nice holey clay pots. So I'm trying to work out where the hell the camera is. More coffee. So they'll both go in there with chunky bark and get wired in place. So I've got some wire, I've got my pliers for bending and my wire cutters, that sort of stuff. Hydrogen peroxide, give the base of the plant and the root system, everything like that, a really good clean up. And to make life easier, I've got a little spray bottle. You can get sprays that attach to the top of these bottles because they're a standard size apparently, but that does me, and I mean it's brown glass so it stops the light getting at it. That works. And my scissors are pre-soaking in the 70% rubbing alcohol. The two important things with those things are, I know that's food grade, but the bit of that is irrelevant. It's the 3% that's important. You could start going above that, you're going to start doing some, probably doing some harm. So 3% hydrogen peroxide won't damage the plant. And the rubbing alcohol at that strength, 70%, kills germs. Yep, so that's that lot. Right, I just need to get myself a coffee and get myself organised here, get plants out of the way, and then we'll start getting them out of the pot and we can play the what's in my pot game. As I say, I've got two Cattleyas, you've already seen them, and this one, Psychopsis papilio, it's a species, the alba form. This has been on its last legs for so long I've forgotten what a good one looks like. But I've decided to give it another go. I was worried that it had the dreaded F stuff. It's dehydrated, yeah, its latest leaf is not good. Two of its older leaves I've just taken off because they've gone beyond being useful for the plant. So I'm now left with pseudobulbs that are far too deep in the pot, These things are prone to rotting, and I suspect when I get this out it's got virtually no roots. So what I'm hoping to do is try and regenerate a root system and get a new growth going and a new leaf. Otherwise this plant is doomed, which would be a shame because I do like the blooms. But I'm going to have a go at that and see what I can do. It could be that I give up. When I get this out of the pot, if it's beyond repair, I mean the best I can do is possibly just put it in some moss and see if it will grow, but I'll make that decision in a minute. So let's get myself a coffee, get organised, and we'll go from there. Okay, let's make a start then. Let's get the scaffolding off this one first. Do I need to cut it off? Yeah, it'll come off easier in two pieces than it will in one. And this pot won't be reused, so I'm not worried about the bit hanging off the side. I'll clean that up when I wash and sterilise the pot later. Right, this one got singed a bit. This was a warning shot. Yeah, the other leaf on that pseudobulb went brown and dropped off, and this one has been badly burnt. Quite honestly is serving no purpose anymore, so I'll take that off just to make it look prettier in the pot when it's repotted. It's got far more yellow and brown than it ought to have, basically. The rest of the leaves aren't too bad. A few little bug marks from when the leaves were young on that latest growth, but let's get the thing out and see what we're working with. This one's got several new growths on it, and I'm taking a little bit of risk because I don't see any signs of new roots yet, but I still want it out of the pot. Now, both of these Cattleyas that I'm doing now were repotted by me, but some time ago, and so they are in Orchiata bark. So if any sticks to the roots, rather than damage the roots, it's going to stay there, because in the open holey pots, yeah, I mean, a lot of this is well stuck on. But one of the main reasons for repotting is the unsightly algae, which I'm afraid you just really have to put up with if you've got clear pots. See, that's got new roots just coming there, and those new roots are stuck to that piece of bark, so that piece of bark stays. A lot of the older roots on this are viable, some of them aren't. Yeah, some are gone. Yeah, they're easy to tell, they just pull off, you know. But I'm not going mad with the root system on this. I'm depending on the new root system that it's about to produce, we hope. I haven't got records to actually say when the new roots are formed on this particular Cattleya type. As I said, they all form a pattern which, you know, if you keep your eye on them over the years, you get to know. So if you do need to repot one, you can do it at the right time. But I haven't got such detail levels on all my plants yet. So most of these old roots at the back of the plant are gone. I'm not going to take the back bulbs off, am I? Is that bulb serving a purpose? It's about to lose its only leaf. It'll be a back bulb. I might take this rhizome off to there. It'll make repotting it easier and make room for the new growths better because it can go nearer the edge of the pot. All of the new growths around sort of this area. Got one nice one pushing out here, and there's a couple of signs of others. There's one there, possibly one there. I don't know. I mean, some eyes just don't push on. But if damage occurs in front of the rhizome where an eye is, it will actually often push that eye out of dormancy. But to get all the eyes to grow on a Cattleya type, it really does need damn near perfect conditions, quite honestly, to incite that you know, growth in the older part of the plant. But yeah, I think I'll take that off there, remove that pseudo bulb and that bit, because that's going to get in the way of getting up to the edge of the pot. So you can go in the sink. Other things, there are some signs, a few, of the possibility of some scale coming back on that one. So hopefully the hydrogen peroxide will sort that out. I've got a few scale re-emerging, but I'm reluctant to, you know, douse the whole flipping grow room for the sake of a couple of plants when they can be treated individually. Now this Cattleya has got repot me written all over it. Yeah, it's got new growths and new roots coming in various places, including down in the pot. And in my opinion, with Cattleya types, their roots are precious. Every single one of them. Yeah? They don't produce that many. Some produce very, very few. And to lose one out of three, you know, that's a third of your new roots gone. So the new roots on this are precious. So this area here is going to get minimal disturbance. I'm hoping that these new roots haven't attached yet. But there is a risk element of poking around in that area. I mean, this plant is in Orchiata bark. It hasn't been in there a huge amount of time. So any that sticks on can stay. Yeah, it's going to have to be a tap job. The plant itself is good. The only bad bit on this plant is I've got a little bit of brown on that pseudo bulb that's been there ages and hasn't done anything. I've got some sheaths that need to be taken off. Hidey holes for bugs, especially on things like Cattleyas. It's funny, the Cattleyas get the scale, the Dendrobiums get the mealybugs. They seem to have preferences. Yeah, well, it's only the same as us, you know, we go to a buffet at a wedding and we get our paper plate and try and load it up with the food we like, and we choose the stuff we like best, and the other stuff, you know, we don't. I'm sure bugs have similar tastes. Yeah, so that's a tap job. A lot of this bark is firmly attached, so I'll go careful. New growths on this one. I've got an eye here that may push on, and a nice new growth here, and another nice new growth there. Quite honestly, with this plant, if all three of those eyes develop, actually there's four, there's another one round here, towards the back, there's two round here. So in theory I've got 1, 2, possibly 3, a good one there 4, and a good one there 5, potentially 5 new growths to push on in its holey clay pot with its chunky bark. And if all 5 of those bloom, boy is that going to be a showstopper. In the sink with you. As I say, filming the clean-up process under the sink just doesn't work. It's a tedious task, and it's something I like to crack on with. So I don't expect, I have no high hopes whatsoever for this. I suspect I'm about to scrap the plant, which will be the 3rd time I've scrapped this plant. Literally, this has been put out to be thrown under the hedge twice already, and then the flower opened and I thought, oh well, I'll just keep it while it's in bloom, and then blow me, it did it again. So this has been on the cards to be thrown away probably for about a year. This may be its last chance. I don't expect to see any viable roots in here. I'd like to have been proven wrong, but I don't think so. I really do think this plant has no viable roots. Its only chance really is a new growth, which it may or may not do, but it's in such a poor state. The bulbs it's got are badly desiccated, and I've only got 2 leaves left. So it's not feeding itself very well with virtually 0 roots. I don't know, some of these do actually still seem firm, some don't, but I'll give it a chance. I do like the blooms on this one. I'm reluctant to dump it. It doesn't come up for sale very often. And I think what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to sit it on virtually pure sphagnum moss with some small bark in it, just give it a bit of air around, and I'm going to sit it on the top. It's not going to go in it, it's going to go on it, which means the only hydration is right at the very base of the pseudobulbs. And let's see if that will trigger it into growth, because that's its only hope, is to grow something. I mean, to be really kind to the plant, I should take the spike off, but they're a pain in the arse to grow new ones. Yeah, so some of these roots are actually firm. They don't look a nice colour, and there's certainly no growing tips, but you know, we'll give it a go. Give it hydrogen peroxide, make sure there's nothing lurking in the base of the plant, and just basically sit it gently on top of the plant and probably wire it in place to hold it against that moss. Right, we'll give it a chance, reluctantly. Okay, I'll do a clean up, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, just before we continue, you know me, if I get near a rhizome, so this is a Varnagara apple blossom, squeaky clean. I took that virtually useless pseudo bulb off and that sticky out bit, so that can go right up against the back of the pot now. Nice clean rhizome, happy with that. Always worth a check if you get an opportunity nowadays. Okay, welcome back. Plants are cleaned up. I'm going to do them one at a time, and I'm going to do them quickly. Holey pot, pre-wired. It's no good trying to struggle putting your wires on after you've got the plant in there, because you end up bashing the plant around and moving it around, so that's not good. The reason I've put my chunky bark in there is so that I can sort through it, because although the Orchiate bark is pretty good quality, You do get odd bits in it, you know, little flaky bits. Now there's an example, look, there's a flaky bit. That's not a lot of good, so I'd rather that was out of it. I thought I'd got most of them. And you also get the odd piece of wood. But yeah, you know, stick with the chunky stuff, stick with the quality stuff. I don't think any bark is completely uniform. But I have seen on the market, I actually saw it at the BOC show that I went to last November in Norwich. Now the important thing with this is to get the plant high enough that the wire can actually do some good, because if it's too low the wire will float across the top and serve no purpose. That's the only criteria really, is to just make sure the plant is high enough to be strapped in. And I cut that rhizome, you saw me do that. I put some cinnamon on that, and I now need this area of the plant right over against the back of the pot. So that's one of the criteria, and the other criteria is that it's high enough for the wires to do some good. And I'd rather it was sat high than low. Yeah, the higher it is, the more bark it's got to get into. More surface area it's got, it's nearer the pot, pot's wider at the top than it is halfway down, all that sort of stuff. So really this is only going to sit on it. Need something to sit on around the back there. How about this for a theory then? Don't take this as fact, this is me thinking out loud. Okay, with Cattleya types this is specifically. You've got a Cattleya that's just bloomed, shall we say, so it's used up a lot of its resources, and you know, you take the bloom spike off. It's now in a position where it's mindset, I suppose, if you can call it. It knows it didn't reproduce, it didn't produce seed, there's no seed pod. So it's now thinking about what can I do to get, you know, to recover myself from this situation. And the answer is to put new growths out. Now some Cattleyas seem to be of the frame of mind, which I know is the silly expression, but you know what I mean. And it actually prepares for those new growths by growing some new roots first. Thinking if I've got more new growths, the root system I've got will need to be beefed up a bit, basically. Yeah, so put new roots out. And that's what it'll do. Put new roots out. And then the growths will push on, supported by that new root system that it's just put out. Yeah, that sort of makes sense to me. And then you get others that think to themselves, well, perhaps my root system's not bad as it stands, and I'll get some new growths going, and as I do it, I'll produce some new roots to go with them, and we'll do it together. And then you get others that decide, quite what the logic is in plant terminology, but the new growths get to virtually mature before any new roots come out. Well, that sounds like a plant that's more than happy with its current root system. But when we artificially create an environment for that plant to grow in, we can muck up that logic. You know, it pushes out new roots into stale media, and you know, the root system doesn't do as well as perhaps it might. So you've got that sort of logic as well. As I say, this is just me thinking out loud, that's all. But at the end of the day with Cattleyas, I've just knocked a new growth off. Now that is annoying, especially with one that hasn't got many, so I have to rely on it reacting to that and pushing some back eyes. I suspect that got knocked in the washing process, because that was just loose. I didn't knock it then, it just fell off. Okay, it's actually quite sturdy with just one wire. Yeah, I think I can get away with the one wire, so I can take the other one off. Just removing a little bit of bark now. Now it's in its position. Make sure no pseudo-bulbs are buried and no eyes have got bark up against them. They get a clear run, basically. Those odd bits of bark can hide the wire. So a little bit of heave-ho with the pliers, just to pull that wire nice and tight, and put a kink in it so that it can't backtrack while I'm sorting it out. So there we go. Yep, that'll do. And then I can just trim that off, and that end can just stay there. Trying to thread it back in a hole with stiff wire like this doesn't really serve any purpose. Okay, so there we go, that's that one. And as I said, pushing my luck with this one, because there are a few new root tips showing in part of the root area, but yeah. The other thing I'm a trifle worried about is this little brown area here. Now that's on the pseudo bulb that's got a spike that's been cut. Now that may just be that the foggers or something have kept that a little bit too moist. But it's had a good spray, all the sheaths have been taken off. Oops, missed a bit. And any scale that might have been on there are now gone. So let's just get that old piece of wire out, because I now no longer need it. It's easier to just cut that and it'll pull out easy then. There we go. So that's Ivana Gara done. Let's hopefully that will be happy in its new pot. Put the tag around the back end. That's where there won't be any new growths to get in the way. So that's one done. Right, I'll be back with another one shortly. Okay, well that was a surprise. The large Cattleya is actually two plants. And I've decided to actually pot them separately. The logic being that this piece, this is the piece with the better new root growth at the moment, has got an eye here and a new growth here. So it's got two new growths on it, which potentially will both flower. It's got no old back bulbs on it, every bulb is leaved. So it's got strength from photosynthesis, it's got new root growth, what was down in the pot, which is now dangling, but will be in this pot in a minute, and two new growths, plus a root system. That's a very viable plant in its own right. So that one will go first, and I won't bother filming this one as well. Now this one's got a new eye pushing there. There was an old bulb on there that I took off, which was convenient because yes, we have another clean Cattleya, which is good. This one hasn't got much signs of new root growth on it, but looking at the pattern on that one, the new root growths are around the same time as the new growths, so there will be new roots on this soon. That's got a good strong new growth there, a potential eye there, another one here, and another one here. So in theory that's going to grow 3 or 4 new growths on that size plant. It's got 4 bulbs at the moment. If it gets 4 new growths, it's just doubled in size. If I put both of those together, I'll have probably 6, maybe 7 new growths. That's quite a lot for the size of the pot. So I'm going to pot them separately. That are my theory, what I have. So this is exactly the same process as before. I'm relying on the fact that last time I got away with 1 wire, and I'm hoping I get away with 1 wire this time. But the fact that there's a fair few new roots coming out on this one, it's going to attach itself to the pot very, very quickly. Now because this has got new growths, basically here is 1, so that needs room to grow along with its roots, and the others around the other side of the plant. So this one's going to have to go in the middle, and I've just remembered that this one has actually got dangly roots, so I'm going to have to take half the bark out now. Duh. Think ahead, boy. And with these holey clay pots, if there's roots right down at the base of the pot, it doesn't matter, they'll grow out the drainage hole. They'll find a way. Right, so that's about the height I want the plant, and just bearing in mind I need to put a wire across it, and I don't want the wire to go across anywhere near new growths. That would be silly. So we can now backfill. There's quite a central vase in the middle of this root system that potentially wouldn't get any bark in without a little bit of help. Now on a Cattleya that wouldn't be the end of the world. Airspace around a Cattleya root system really is not a big deal. So if I leave a few spaces, it's not the end of the world. And I only ever loosely pack Cattleyas. The watering will pack those the media down in a bit tighter. Each time I water there'll be a little bit of movement and another little piece of bark will just find a little gap to go in, and it will repeat the process until it's got itself into a state where the bark doesn't move anymore. The other thing I would say with this Orchiata bark is, especially this big stuff, it's incredibly dusty when it's new, which it flipping well shouldn't be. It should have been washed. But it isn't, and as a consequence I won't water these today. I'll just give those roots a chance to just dry off a bit because they've been absolutely drowned. Yeah, I quite like that as is. Let's get me wire around. And as a consequence I'm going to pinch one new root here. Oh, well, hopefully it will just pull it down and not actually break it. What was I in the middle of saying? Is it gone completely? It does that sometimes when you get older. Yes, I believe that these Cattleyas do better in these holey clay pots because they get a much faster wet-dry cycle, which is what they need. They need that wet-dry cycle. So even though your media might not be breaking down, as it gets older, it stays wet longer. So their wet-dry cycle is extended. Yeah? Which means they stay wet longer. And I believe that that is part and parcel to why some of the roots go over. It's because they're not drying out fast enough, which is why I want all my Cattleyas in these pots. These pots dry in a day. What they're going to be like in the winter I don't know yet. I haven't had a winter with them yet. But given that the Cattleyas won't be growing at a colossal rate in the winter, I'll worry about that when I get there. Okay, so I've got new roots lying on top of the media. They will find their way down in, or they'll find their way over the edge of the pot. Please themselves, either way will do. Okay, so that's one done. And quite honestly, I've got a new growth there. That's got that amount of pot to go into. I've got one here that's highly likely to shoot out, so that's got that to go into. And most of the roots are pointing this way, so they've got plenty of room to go as well. Strangely enough, there aren't any new roots pointing that way. So that's one done. Okay, I'll do the other one and then we'll get on to the Psychopsis. Okay, the thought process is with the Psychopsis, which has not got a good root system, but some of the roots are viable, they're still firm. Some aren't. I'm not going to bother trimming it because if this works it's not going to stay in this pot long anyway, because if it starts to grow then it can be moved on, perhaps in a year or so. But so I've put, it's a little air cone pot. Air cone pots on the small size are not that easy to come by. The bigger ones, you can get air cones in all sizes, but they're not so easy to come by in the small one. I've got some sphagnum moss and some sponge rock, giant perlite. And that's all it's going to get, because all I want to do is keep the base of the plant moist, and it's not going to get a lot of it. The idea is to sit the plant on the top of this with plenty of air around the roots and moisture as well provided by the moss, yeah, and some air in around that moss via the sponge rock or perlite. So I pre-looped my piece of wire quite low down because I want to pull on that rhizome. This is a narrow gauge wire. We don't need the thick chunky stuff. It's not a giant plant. I'm not holding weight in place, I just don't want wobbling. And then if any new little delicate roots do push out, there's no wobbling when I pick it up to water it. That's all it's for. Now I need to think about where that wire is actually going to go. See, if this is going to produce a new growth, there is no predictability. I mean, that's the last leaf it produced. In theory, that's potentially where a new growth could come from, but it could just as easily come off of this one, or both. That would be good, wouldn't it? Yeah? So I need that wire to just go across the centre of the plant. The problem with these things is the spike is enormous, and this isn't even a long one. So I need to get a leaf and a spike through the loop, so that the loop then comes down without whacking the spike around, because it's actually in bud and it will bloom again shortly. And as I said, I'm not sinking any roots into anything. It's just going to sit on there. And then if it does push out new roots, I might actually add a tiny little bit of moss around there, but I don't want these pseudo bulbs buried. But let's get the plant firmed up first. Just pull my little loop, and by putting this quite low in the pot, it effectively adds a little bit of extra humidity round the base of the plant, because it'll sort of stay in the pot. How is that? Lovely. That's all it needs. Just needs to be firm enough to not wobble when I pick it up with that great big long dangly spike, which when the bloom's out is top heavy, quite honestly. So that's all I'm going to do. What I am going to do is just loop that round there and twist that wire, because it's so thin it has the capability of moving. So if I just put it around the outside of the pot, not exactly elegant, but it'll do the job. And I can just put a twist in it and pull it nice and tight, then it won't retract back into the pot at all. Just give that a little pull and a little twist, and then it's nice and tight and shouldn't move. And then those dangly ends can just tuck down there out the way so I don't jam my fingers on them. So that's it. You know, I don't think I am going to put any more moss in there. I'm just going to leave it at that. In fact, I can just lift a little bit of that moss where there aren't any roots and bring it round to where there are a couple. And that's not getting pushed down, that's just getting gently pushed, placed more like, on top. So I've got no media around the base of the pseudo bulbs, they're sat on the media, and I'm happy with that. As I said, this is a last ditch attempt really to try and get this thing to grow, because it hasn't done for a long time. Now this plant got a very slight outbreak of spider mites a while ago. They didn't last long, but it did get a couple. You know, so my grow room's not immune from spider mites, but because I handle my plants frequently, they never get a chance to form an outbreak. They have a little pioneer colony that never goes home. They don't make it. So there we go, that's that. As I say, no new growths and no new roots on its last legs. But from there, I have had plants recover before, so let's give it a go. Okay, so that's a repotting done. It was 3 plants, turned out to be 4 in the end. 2 Cattleyas have gone into their separate pots. The other one is back in the grow room now, so you can't see that. So basically a repotting session. That's my last 2 Cattleyas that weren't in holey pots are now in them. Happy with that. That's that task over. I've now got to think about what I might use the smaller holey pots for. Try some oncidium types that have got the larger roots. You know, some of the intergenerics that don't grow too large could go in small holey pots. Nice wet dry cycle, you know, they do like that. And the beauty of these pots is nothing's going to stay too wet in the winter when the temperatures go down, because these dry fast. Even in the lower temperatures, the evaporative process is going to get that dry quite quickly, which means they can have a little trickle of water now and again just to hydrate them, not stop them drying out, without them being soggy for 3 or 4 days in low temperature. So that's the theory. Okay, see you again next time. Thanks for dropping by.